Uh, Many thanks, Mr. Lakshmi Kumar, and also Group Captain Vijay Kumar for introducing me. By the way, I am born as a Bengali with very sweet teeth, and you know that we have the best Rasagulla there. And I don't get Rasagulla in Chennai. Talking about the subject of crisis, not getting Rasagulla in Chennai is a crisis for me. But you have definitely the best idli and dosa and all the foods in Chennai for sure. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Highly privileged to be here and having this opportunity to talk on this topic, probably relevant to most of you or all of you. And this is something I guarantee that you have come across in your life, small or medium or large, doesn't matter. You have come across to this particular crisis. Whether it is you as an individual or part of these organizations or a society or a country, none of us are insulated of this crisis. However, I will also talk about a little bit of how those crises are interconnected and how you as a leader or as an individual or as a part of society or in a country or in organizations should take your actions. Either you are in the capacity of the leadership in the organizations or in the society or in the family or for yourself as well. Now, if you look the etymology of this word crisis or the chaos, the word crisis came from a Greek word called crisis, K-R-I-S-I-S. Only the change is the C by the K. And that word crisis came from a verb called krinia. That is also Greek sources. The literal meaning of this word is actually actions or decisions. Now, this is very interesting when you actually work on a particular subject. If you look into this etymology of this word, many a times you invent of what is this word for. And there is a similar word of crisis of today's topic, or the chaos of the today's topic, is actually deriving towards a directions of decisions. Now, how many of us actually thought about crisis means you have to decide? As I already said that you as an individual, or I as an individual, are not insulated from any of the crises globally. Now, some of the crises are pretty well known or expected or you might have experienced. Let's, for example, a pandemic. You might have experienced the pandemic. If not the COVID, before COVID there was some different pandemics. Probably the scale were different from one to others. You might have also gone through certain crises of the trade war between one country to other country. And how you see that one of the trade war, either by the policy or by not having a good friendly relationship between one country to other country, how those trade wars is actually impacting your business. Now, I assume that many of you who are present in this room or also the colleagues who join online are representing some sort of responsibility in the form of business or in the form of your society or in the form of your country. And that's why this is very important to understand that the crisis or the chaos nowadays, it's even more. And I assume on my personal note that the amount of the crisis or amount of the chaos or amount of uncertainties, whatever going to happen in the world in the next foreseeable future, are not going to be less. One of the greatest events of that are going to happen tomorrow, the elections of America. I don't know. The topic of these elections is democracy, economy, LGBT, and the climate. But if you see the concept of the left and the right, democratic and the republics, two very, very different things. And the society, the number one GDP country, is so much of divisive nowadays. Probably it was never in the last 150 years of the US. And that's important for the entire world. And I will also try to explain of how those are interconnected. But before that, I can only try to relevant this example that whether it is a crisis, you as an individual in your life, or in your society, or in your family, or in organizations, or in a country, or a part of regions or the globals, there are very important things which has never changed. That during the crisis or the chaos, you have to take tough decisions. You have to take tough decisions. We might have seen, many of you might have experienced during this COVID time, if you had to ramp down a plant and ramp up your plant, and your colleagues are struggling, you're struggling, and you could probably struggle with the decisions because it was not known. The second one, which is also important during the crisis or the chaos, is you have to enhance the morale of your team member. This has never changed. It is still. It was a crisis in the past. Enhance the morale of your team member or your family member or the people that you meet. And the third one, which is very important, when it is a crisis, you have to reinvent the goal. Because you don't see your goal is much more relevant on that day. You probably have to reinvent your goal. So I think I can do it. Okay, good. Let me tell you a story before I go into the topic. I don't know how many of you are aware of this guy, standing tall, Mr. Shackleton. He actually got an award, and his name is Sir Ernest Shackleton. He passed away in 1922, or 102 years back. But he's actually known as the great of the greatest leaders, how endurance of leadership called. There are a lot of documentary. You can Google it later. You can try to just search these Shackleton's endurance expeditions in your YouTube. You will see 100 videos. In fact, there was a movie just a couple of years back which was released. So this is a story of the 2 years long story. I will try to narrate that in 2 and 3 minutes. Of that story and how this endurance is actually worked on. This guy, Mr. Shackleton, was born in Ireland and later moved to UK and raised in UK. So he was a certified mariner and was able to command a ship. So his passion was to actually command the ships, and he wanted to go to the south pole of the Antarctica. If you can look into the slides, the Antarctica 1, 2, 3. This 3 point is the south pole of the Antarctica, starting from the south of Georgia to reach to the south pole of the Antarctica. So he tried that along with many others. He failed. He could reach up to 90 miles or something like that. By the way, the length of these of the Antarctica from the south of Georgia is around 2,000 miles. So he could reach up to 90 miles, but he could never be successful. But a couple of the fellow memberships of his time, one is called Mr. Amundsen, the other one is called Robert Scott. They could reach the south pole of the Antarctica in 1912 or something like that. So Mr. Shackleton was very devastated. He wanted to achieve that for the first times in the world, but he couldn't do that. 2 of his fellow members achieved that. And then he defined a new goal. His new goal was that he would like to cross the overall Antarctica as a trans-Antarctic, that he will come from the point 1 and will reach the point 10 in the slide that you can see. This is called trans-Antarctic expeditions. As usually, whenever you take a very high ambitious goal, people will call you mad, crazy, unreasonable, impractical, and it was not different for Shackleton as well. It was during the Second World War. You remember, 1914 was the Second World War. Right? During that time, Shackleton wanted to this expedition, which is famously known as endurance expeditions in the ship, and it took him 2 years to cross that with a lot of struggles. But he cannot do this alone. He wanted the men. And he made a publications in that time, during that time in the Daily News in UK in 1914, 110 years back. And this was exactly written like this: man wanted for hazardous journey, low wages, almost no wages, bitter cold, long hours of the complete darkness, safe return is doubtful, honor and recognition in event of success. This was the advertisement. And he got 22 members. Now, Many of you who are part of these organizations are dealing with the Gen Z or the Gen Alpha or the millennials or whatever you see. There is one thing which has never changed for them actually. The recognitions, the honor part of it. So this is still relevant for nowadays. However, he got 22 of them. During August 1914, they have started the journey. From point number 1 in the map from south of Georgia. It took them 6 months to cross certain space or certain miles. And then after 6 months or 7 months in February 1915, the ship got stuck because it was heavy, dense ice. The ship got stuck. So then they decided that, okay, let us wait for the summer to come because in winter the ice are very solid, you cannot move. So they waited 4 months till the time the summer comes. Bitter cold, you cannot imagine that. There was no mobile. There was no network there for sure. There was no mobile. There was limited food for sure. And they waited 4 or 5 months. And then when the summer came, they started moving. The ship cracked. The ship cracked. And then decided to take this small boat out, go for the camping where the ice are very solid. They did the camping for another 3-4 months on the ice, 23 of them. And then when the weather favorable, they started moving again and again and again and again, months after months, months after months, months. They were carrying many dogs. At that time, they didn't have any food. So they decided to shoot the dog and eat the meat of the dog. At that time, it was dark, cold, bitter. Nothing was there. But Mr. Shackleton was the one single boss, carrying not only the life of himself, but also the 22 others member. But he had one thing in mind, that he wanted to cross the Trans-Antarctic, and that's his goal. And finally, they reached to a point number 6, which is called an Elephant Island. In that Elephant Island, they had a temporary camp, and they said that, no, this is not possible. And they want to cross, go back to the point number 1 again in the slide, as you can see that. And then Shackleton said that, okay, guys, you stay here. I will take 2 of you, and I will go to the point number 1, and I will bring the well catcher, and will rescue you. They thought that it will take 5 or 6 days, but it took 14 days. They were almost out of the food. Shackleton reached, along with 2 of his members, in the point number 1, unfortunately on the other side of the mountain, of the south of Georgia, which is well stationed. So they had to cross the mountain, which never, ever in their lifetime or anyone in the world crossed that mountain, which is fully iced. They crossed that mountain, reached the well station, and then they bring the well stations and rescued all 22 members. And they all came back with full life after trapped, crashed, sunk, marched, sailed, and finally all present and accounted for. This was his leadership. There was many documentary on that. With a lot of struggles, a lot of troubles, but Mr. Shackleton was the leader of that. Now, if you go to this, the evolvement or the evolutions of the leadership from 1930 to 1950, there are many meta-analyses of the leadership. You would see that leadership via one-man show up to 1930 to 50. From 50 to 70, the leadership was more of an empowerment. And then of 80 to 2010, after the leadership via either the delegations or the people development or the task focus or the charisma and so on and so forth. Now in the last 10, 15 years, the leadership is more of an transformational leadership. But this guy, Shackleton, actually gone through everything in his life 110 years back. That's why it says famously that if you want the scientific research or scientific way of reaching certain positions or a very engineering way, you can go for Amundsen or the Robert who actually went to the South Pole. But when you have nothing, when you are going through a huge crisis or chaos, just kneel down and pray for the Shackleton. Do we not feel sometimes very handicapped of these situations in our life? When in 2019 the COVID hit, there was no oxygen cylinder, no oxygen bed. Have we not only prayed to the God? Have we not only looked for some support from outside and prayed for our survival? Is it not the people in Gaza or Lebanon or Israel or Iran or many other parts of the world or Ukraine or Russia praying to the God only for the survival? And there are many things of such happening. the world has not changed. The crises have taken a different magnitude than the example that we have taken. But how, as a leader, or as an individual, or as a part of the society or the country or the organization, what you take, I talked three topics, this has not changed. Taking the tough decisions during the crisis, sustaining the moral, and reinventing the goal. But if I may ask you the current crisis, what are the current crises according to you? You may say 5 different things, I'm sure. I will say 5 different things. Many different crises are going on. I have listed down a couple of crises here while I was preparing for this talk. And no other than this better day of today, which is just one day before of the elections, the USA versus itself. What's happening? I'm sure all of you are very well aware. All of you are happening. I can share one of my personal experience on the day of the debate when it was happening between Donald Trump and Mr. Biden. I was actually traveling from a city of Alabama to Nashville city. And 2 of my American friends were with me, and we were traveling together. And I found the 3 of them. I found 3 of them were super frustrated on both the leaders. And I was talking to them that, why you are so frustrated? Because many of the countries in Asia, we would love to send our kids or we would love to settle in our country because you to us or to many of us are the country of destination, the country of heaven. And they said something which is really, really thought-provoking for me. They said that, do you send your kid to school and pray to the God that your child will come with life? I said, no. And they said, yes, we do. See, the crisis has a different forms. The crisis has a different meanings to a different society on that. But what's happening at the moment, and why I'm bringing this example of US versus itself, because that matters for the globe. That really matters for the globe. An economy of close to $30 trillion. By the way, many of you know that India at the moment is crossing only $4 trillion. $4 trillion. See, US is the number 1 economy. They make a lot of decisions which is important for the entire world, if not for the entire world peace. And the election coming tomorrow, whatever the result is, there is going to be a significant changes whether it is left or right. Now, the second one, you also know that what's happening in the Middle East or in the Ukraine. When I don't want to be politically correct, I don't want to call it an invasion of the war. Many of them are calling invasion, many of them calling them war. But whatever it is, it's happening in the last 2.5 to 3 years. What's happening in the Middle East, you know that. I think the powder is very dry and many one carrying the matchbox. It's just a moment of further escalations and a full cry. And why that is important for us to understand, if you run a business organization or if you play a leadership role in organizations, and I will try to connect with that, what is important for us or what is important for India within us. Ungoverned AI, I was also talking to one of the fellow colleagues here. AI is now the new barge, the artificial intelligence. I am also kind of a regular user of the Chat GPT or the Gemini or everything. But how this ungoverned AI is creating a lot of synthetic truth, deep fake truth, and how those misinformation and disinformation is paralyzing society and polarizing the society, and how this polarization of the society is actually a very negative side of the economic activities, and how those economic activities are creating a lot of trade barriers between one to other. I will also try to create some map on that. And you probably know the China recovery. The China is not recovering. China is known to have a GDP growth of 6 or 7 or 8%, but now it's a bit of slowdown. And what does that matter for us is also very important to understand why this is a crisis. Climate crisis, no better than the present topic. This session was supposed to be, I guess, a couple of weeks back, and because of this inclement weather, this was postponed. If you look at the headlines of yesterday in the paper, October was the warmest month in the history of India. It came, I think, yesterday or day before. October was, and this is not the last time it's happening. This will happen again. It will happen again and again and again. The sad part of that is the whole world is still divided. There are a lot of dissonance between this topic of what are the action items. And I will also talk about a little bit on that. And the last one is the fight for the critical minerals. This is an amazing fighting. I don't know how many of you are involved into that. Since I take care of the chemical industry of my organization called BASF, which is the largest chemical company in the world. And we do have a lot of this trading, whether it is minings or the resource material, how various economy globally or various countries are actually fighting for these minerals and the trade wars, and how the rise of populists are happening and dividing this entire world. Now, look at this. I will probably say that again. No, thank you very much for your comment. Okay. Now, this was a survey conducted by the World Economic Forum. This is called the interconnected crisis. This has 5 divisions, as we can look at. I just request you to look at the slides for a moment. It is divided into economic, environmental, geopolitical, societal, and technological. In 5 different colors that we can recognize in the slides here. Now, this crisis, what I was talking about, no crisis in the world is an isolated event. And I repeat this sentence that whether you are thinking about you as an individual, or your society, or your family, or business organizations, or you are in a country, or in a particular continent, it does not matter. Or whichever industry you are, whether you are in the pharmaceuticals, automotive, footwear, chemicals, agro, it does not matter. It is relevant for all of us. You are not insulated of any of the crises happening at any point of time, at any magnitudes, because these are interconnected. And I will try to explain to you that, look at these societal polarizations. This societal polarization, which is mostly governed by misinformation and disinformation, which is driven by this ungoverned AI, and societal polarization is actually causing of lack of economic activities. And because of lack of economic activities, you have unemployment. Because of unemployment, you have inflations. Because of inflations, you have economic downturn. Because of economic downturns, you cannot spend in the right infrastructures. Because of you cannot spend in the right infrastructures, you cannot take actions on many of the CSR activities or the climate activities or these activities. Because of that, you can have the chronic disease. Because of that, you are immobilized. See, from this ungoverned AI, because. And you can try and take any ball from anywhere, from any magnitudes or any size, the crisis, whether it is economical, whether it is societal, whether it is environmental, whether it is technological, whether it is economic, it's all mostly interconnected, borderless. If something happening anywhere in the world, you are going to be impacted. And this is the nature of the crisis nowadays. This is the nature of the chaos nowadays. So what does that mean for you if you lead a business? What does that mean for you if you lead an organization? And what kind of actions you take as a leader? And that's the topic of today. I will try to share some of my experience during the crisis. What should be the experiences? I'm sure you can also add on that. Now, this is a perception survey. Very interesting fact. This is a perception survey happened again by the World Economic Forum. And this is actually a Bible of the World Economic Forum of the last 2 decades of understanding the global crisis. This perception survey is actually happening roughly around 1,000 people, very influential people from the civil society, from the government, from the academia, around the world. And then the perception survey is further mapped with the risk categories in the below graph what you see. And that survey was conducted around 11 to 12,000 people across countries, so more than 100 countries. India was also part of that, of understanding the risk. The extreme weather, 2/3 of the survey participants say extreme weather is going to be a big crisis for us. Extreme weather, the climate changes. Now, the 3rd and 4th, the societal polarizations or the political polarizations, and political polarization is linked with these economic activities, are also 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And the second one is misinformation and disinformation. And I will show a fact. I'm sure many of you would probably be a little surprised on that. Now, these climate activities, I think we're reaching to a point where there will be no return. I don't know how many of you are actively engaging yourself into these overall weather changes or the climate changes, what's happening slowly but steadily, and how that is covering this entire world in terms of the very, very deep crisis. You probably are also aware, if you are part of the big organizations, that India government has mandated the regulations of ESG of the top 100 companies, and many of those topics are driven by this environmental topic. So there are actions here, and I know that you also probably are aware that India government has taken a net zero target by 2070. Many of the countries, especially in Europe, they have taken 2045, 2050 on that. So we are also moving into those necessity on that. And how a leadership dilemma should actually work in those crisis points. In the nearer term, in the next 2 years, it is being ranked that misinformations and disinformation is the number one crisis. Unbelievable fact. And I will tell you why. In the next slide, you see that. In 2024, more than 3.5 billion people in the world undergone an election process and selected their leaders. The last one of this year is going to happen tomorrow. This happened in India, this happened in Russia, this happened in Pakistan, happened in European Council, happened in many European countries, happened in Bangladesh, happened in Indonesia, happened in Mexico, many other countries. They have selected their leaders. Whether it is during this election campaign, whether it is even without this election campaigns, the amount of fake news, synthetic news, deep fake fact with the voice cloning, with the help of AI, and how those informations are polarizing our belief, and how those informations are actually taking us towards a decision point, and how those decisions is translating into our actions, and probably selecting our leaders based on the mis and disinformation is the number one problem in India. It is being ranked by World Economic Forum after the survey. This is the number one crisis there. All of you use social media, I'm sure, whether it is Twitter or Instagram or the Facebook. Many of those deepfake synthetic information, we can't even believe that this is a deepfake one. And how those are instigating slowly within us towards a certain belief system and making us polarized on a certain belief system and making us to take certain actions and taking a decisions about certain fact is the number one problem in India, surveyed by World Economic Forum in 2024. And this is being also going to be a problem for next couple of years. The youth in India has actually explained that this is the number one problem in India at the moment. This is a problem in many other countries as well, but it is ranked as number one in India. Unbelievable on that. Now, I will just switch that what's happening in the world economy and I'll slowly, very quickly come back to what's happening in India and how a leader should take a role in the decision-making process. Very quickly on the slides that before COVID and after COVID and now, with the fact of this Russia-Ukraine conflict, with the fact of the Middle East conflict, the world economy is slowing down at a point of 0.5 to 0.6. You see that in the last 10 years, 2010 to 2019, the growth of the world GDP was 3.1. Let's ignore 2021 because this was the recovery of the economy. 2022, it was 3. 2023, it was 2.6. 2024, it is predicted 2.4. So from 3.1 to 2.4, a gap of 0.7 of the global GDP is actually a lot. A lot. I'll spend some more time here. One of my favorite slides here. Indian economy highlights. You can spend 1 hour in this slide. There are great news and there are not so great news here. Now let me start with the great news. India is the fastest growing economy. Now, you may say that why I'm bringing this growth and leading to the crisis and the chaos, I will link later part of my last 2-3 slides. India is the fastest growing economy, you know that. The GDP of ours is 4 trillion in 2024. And we believe that by 2027, we will be the third largest GDP and we will cross Japan and Germany. Probably some of you are aware of this fact. we will be 5 trillion by 2027 and 7 trillion by 2030. That's the vision of us. If we can grow at the rate of 5.8 to 6.5%. But we will still be third, and we don't know when we will be second or ever we will be second or not. We don't know. Because the nearest one, the second one is China, with a GDP size of close to 18 trillion, which is already close to 5 times larger than us. And US is close to 29 trillion. That's a very big economy. Yeah? Now, that's very sweet facts. Very sweet facts. And if you look at all these KPIs from the country economic point of view, you will see many of those are very favorable for us, whether it is CPI index, whether it's interest rate, whether it is fiscal deficit or unemployment, and so on and so forth. Now, let's just flip the coin a little bit. The per capita income, it's a 1.4 trillion people, right? Per capita income, in terms of the overall size of the GDP, India is ranked 5. In 3 years of time, it will be ranked 3. In terms of the per capita income, our rank in India is 140. From a GDP ranked of 5th, of per capita income of 114. Partly, it is driven by the